We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else. As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, and all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson. It's our Friday bonus show. That's right. We've been doing this all throughout draft season. Sam, you ready to go?
Let's go.
We're breaking down the PFF draft board. We haven't given our official breakdown of the entire draft board. It's over at pff.com or Google PFF draft board. It's really slick if you haven't seen it yet. You can sort by position, and it actually has the draft guide information there. For the first time ever, you can see the entire draft guide profile. You do have to sign up for Edge, but go check it out. And we appreciate everybody that sent in hundreds of screenshots. We've got great response yesterday. We said, if you send in a screenshot showing us that you have subscribed to both the PFF NFL Daily and the PFF NFL Podcast, both of the podcasts that Sam and I host, you send us the screenshots, we'll give away a free PFF Edge annual. Should we do that later in the show? Announce a winner?
Okay.
And then we'll have another winner next show. We can do one winner per show because we're getting pretty good response. So you guys can still do that. Show us that you have subscribed to the PFF NFL Podcast, the PFF NFL Daily, both podcasts. On podcast, not YouTube. The Daily's only in podcast world. And we just want to say, hey, thank you to all of our new listeners that have showed up here during draft season. We want to keep you guys around and enjoy the football discussion. So you ready to get into it?
Yep.
Let's do it. So we're talking draft board. Yesterday we broke down the quarterbacks. I don't think we need to rehash the quarterback part of the draft board. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. But high level, I mean, some of the positions might be a high level view. Some more we might get into detail. But from a quarterback standpoint, high level, we've got 5 first-round quarterbacks. Everybody after that, more of a fringe starter, backup type by our board. But go to yesterday's episode. Kurt Warner was on the show, and he was fantastic. And then we broke down all of the quarterbacks as well, or the top quarterbacks in the draft. So go check that out for our quarterback analysis.
But just a quick, the way it is order-wise on the PFF big board, it's Lawrence, Wilson, Fields. I don't have
Trey Lance and then Mac Jones.
Yep. Then
I would go Mac Jones then Trey Lance personally.
Okay. Then we have Trask, Davis Mills, Kellen Mond, Jamie Newman, Shane Buechele, Felipe Franks, and the rest of the quarterbacks you don't want.
The rest of the quarterbacks that you don't want, huh? All right. What position do we want to go to next?
Take your pick. Where are we going?
Let's go wide receivers.
Okay.
All right. We'll go out of order, or somewhat. Is it out of order?
No, it's in order on the big board.
It is order on the big. Usually goes running backs after that. Okay. So wide receivers. We have officially flipped Devontae Smith above Jalen Waddle. I know this is a big deal for you.
Correctly.
You fought for it. Mm-hmm. Are you good with the top here? Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle all rank in our top 10 overall on the big board, 6, 7, and 8, respectively.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you knew Devontae Smith was going to play at like 190 pounds, which he won't. Like he said, he's 170, plays at 170, has played at 170, will be playing at 170. That's what he is. If you knew that he was 20 pounds bigger, I think he would be the best receiver in this draft. The fact that he isn't, even though it has yet to manifest itself anywhere as like a problem, just that unknown fear factor, I think, makes it enough for you to tie break and go Jamar Chase number one, because he just doesn't have those concerns. If that wasn't there, I think you would make a very good case that Devontae Smith is the best receiver in the draft and should be number one. I certainly wouldn't hate rankings that have him number one, but I also think that the right move is probably to err on the side of that's pretty unprecedented. Let's just default to the guy that isn't 170.
When we go to Jalen Waddle at 8, is your biggest concern just not seeing it or not thinking he can do it? You always reference, he played in the slot against off coverage all the time.
There's way too much projection involved in Jalen Waddle, which is the same problem that was in existence for Henry Ruggs last year. Now, I think Waddle is a better player, but Ruggs was not the player that he was being built up to be at draft time. But everyone was like, well, look at how he wins. It's outside, and he does have these contested catch skills, and if you put all this together and you expand his role and you do all these things, he becomes amazing. You're like, well, okay, but where has that been yet? Now, with Waddle, it's, well, he's got the skills to play outside and be a Tyreek Hill type player. It's like, sure, but we have yet to see him really do that. Now, it's closer. We've seen more of that from him than we have for Ruggs. But I think for a start, I think some of the narrative is wrong. One of the things you will hear a lot is that Jalen Waddle was the number one receiver at Alabama whilst he and Devontae Smith were both healthy for 4 games earlier in this season. I think that's just fundamentally not true. Jalen Waddle was leading in terms of yardage at the point where he got hurt. But he also had a 95-yard catch on like a double move from the slot, which is the difference between the two, right? So if you look at yardage, at yards per route run, at all the sort of things that skews, they all favor Waddle through that 4-game stretch, but they're all built off the back of that one play that is not, I mean, it happens. He can't take it away, but it's a double move from the slot against college defensive backs. It's going to happen, right? So Waddle had one of those. At that point, Devontae Smith had yet to have a catch longer than like 30 yards or something, and yet was still within that one play of him, had more targets by a long way, more catches, the same number of touchdowns, way bigger role on third down. You know, when Alabama needed a play, they were turning to Devontae Smith, not to Jalen Waddle. So I think this idea that Waddle was the number one at any point is just crap. It's not true. At which point, then you look at what they were doing with him. And so much of his career was just playing in the slot against off coverage with so much space to catch and run, which is great. I mean, he was a dangerous, dynamic playmaker with that role, but you're not putting him in the top 10 because of that role. You're putting him in the top 10 because you think he does the same thing with a different set of defensive circumstances, which I think is more of a projection than we're allowing for. Whereas Devontae Smith has proven to be dominant in all situations, including against press coverage on the outside, which is what you're going to need to do in the NFL.
My thing with Waddle, I am always asking with those speed receivers, and I asked the same thing with Henry Ruggs. Are you going to be the next Deshaun Jackson, Will Fuller type, right? A guy that has sub 4.3 type speed or sub 4.3, and completely changes the way defenses defend you. Deshaun Jackson has this track record of incredible, just 18 yards per catch across his career, being this just incredible deep threat and always producing, never being a number one, but always elevating his offense and being just a field stretcher, a legit field stretcher. And Will Fuller had been that guy until last year, where he expanded his game a little bit more and, maybe roided up a little bit and expanded his game. But, Will Fuller was a guy that every time he was on the field, the offense was better. So can Waddle be that guy? We're still asking ourselves if Henry Ruggs can be that guy. We asked ourselves if John Ross could be that guy, and he was not and has not been to this point. They're always so intriguing, but I always like to think of, if I could have Deshaun Jackson, or if I could have, who would you? I've used Jordy Nelson as a comp for Jamar Chase. So if you could have Jordy Nelson, Antonio Brown, Antonio's maybe too good. If you could have Jordy Nelson, or give me a Devontae Smith comp, Chad Johnson, Ochocinco. So you can have Jordy Nelson, Chad Ochocinco, or Deshaun Jackson. Who would you want?
So that's the thing, right? Is that there's one conversation lower in this first round that is how valuable or how high up should you draft a guy who you think is just a slot receiver, no matter how good he is at that role. There's a second conversation, which is, okay, how high should you draft a guy who's just a deep threat? Now, even if he's a really good deep threat, that a really good deep threat is more valuable and therefore should be drafted higher than a really good slot receiver. Agreed?
Yeah.
So Deshaun Jackson should be drafted higher than Julian Edelman or Wes Welker, whoever it is, even when you're readjusting.
If you know that's what you're getting.
Yeah, knowing what we know now type of thing. So readjusting for that, you still draft those guys higher. On the other hand, you still draft a complete receiver above a deep threat. So knowing what you know now, you still draft, a good complete wide receiver above a Deshaun Jackson or a Will Fuller, whoever it is. So that's the issue to me with Jalen Waddle. One, we don't yet know if he can be that Deshaun Jackson, Will Fuller-esque deep threat. Two, if he is, it's still not as valuable as Devontae Smith and Jamar Chase if they are what we think they are, which is, Devontae Smith and Jamar Chase have both been spectacular deep threats as well. It's not like that part is missing from their game.
Right, they can win there as well,
right. Yeah. So now you're saying, well, okay, Jalen Waddle needs to be so phenomenal at what he's doing that it's better than the difference between the deep threat that Smith and Chase are, plus all of the other things they do.
So in the comps that I made were Deshaun Jackson and Will Fuller. It seems like everybody just throws Tyreek Hill out there. Well, for every deep
yes,
Henry Ruggs is the next Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle's the next Tyreek Hill. But I'm saying, is he another one of the unicorns that we just shouldn't be using as comps?
Yes, everybody chasing unicorns is bad, and when your immediate there might not be a bigger unicorn in terms of like just freakish what he does and size and speed and his traits than Tyreek Hill. So if your first reaction is, well, he's the next Tyreek Hill, you're probably just full of it. But Jalen Waddle, you can at least see the comp. So if we're, defending this idea of being able to compare to people without equating them,
yes,
he is the closest equivalent of size, strength, quickness, speed, all those things that Tyreek Hill has put together in one package and been one of the best players in the NFL because of it. Like Waddle at least resembles that a lot compared with other players. So, it's more projection to say, well, Rondale Moore has some of that Tyreek Hill stuff. KJ Hamler has had some of that Tyreek Hill stuff last year. Waddle is like the closest person you're going to find to a Tyreek Hill in terms of that combination of traits. But that doesn't mean, if you're sort of going, well, he can be the next Tyreek Hill, it's probably still crazy.
So that's 3 receivers we have in the top 10. Realistically, we had the same discussion last year. It was Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs. Ruggs was first off the board at 12, was it?
It's 11 or 12. I can't
11
remember.
or 12, 17 for CeeDee Lamb. Jeudy
20.
was 15.
No, Jeudy last till 20, didn't he?
Or 20. Yeah, either way. They didn't go in the top 10 is the point.
2 of them slipped further than we thought they were going to slip.
Now, in our minds, we would have taken them top 10 because of how we value receivers.
Right. Jeudy was 15.
Jeudy was 15. Thank you.
My bad.
Based off how we would have the way we would value receivers, we would have taken them in the top 10. But the NFL likes to, grab their tackles a little bit higher and all that. And that could still happen. There's a lot of tackles lower in the first round on our draft board where the NFL, a tackle need is very binary, right? The Colts have a massive left tackle need. Other teams just have a left tackle need. So those guys we could have a chunk of them go off the board in the top 15 to the right teams. These receivers could drop to the teens or the 20s and drop from our standpoint, go lower than we expected. I do think Chase goes in the top 10, but we don't know. The NFL could be scared of Devontae in his frame. Yep. They could be scared of Waddle's lack of experience. I do think there'll be enough people that convince themselves that he's Tyreek, though. I could see Waddle going off the board ahead of Devontae Smith.
Oh, same. If Henry Ruggs went above the other 2 last year, it wouldn't shock me in the slightest if Waddle was the first receiver drafted. I think it would be a mistake and kind of crazy, but I get it. That's what happened a year ago. It was ridiculous for Henry Ruggs to be drafted ahead of Jerry Jeudy coming out of the same offense was just absurd. Like, knowing what you knew, watching those 2 guys in the same offense, the idea that guy was the better player of the 2, even projected forward, was kind of crazy. And I think the same thing is entirely true with Waddle, but people are convincing themselves because there's a 4-game stretch where you can make the argument if all you're focused on is the yardage. I think also wide receivers now reach this point of almost running back-esque devaluation in the draft. Running backs, it's like, well, don't draft them high because you can get these guys in the 3rd and 4th round. They come in and they get plugged in. They're amazing. And I think the driving force behind those things are different. Like running backs, the reason you could do that is because running backs weren't really the thing that was moving the needle. Like they're not they're not the force that actually drives their own success by and large, which is why you can get them lower down. Wide receivers, I think what you're just seeing is this flood of really good receivers hitting the market for multiple years. Not the market, but the draft, the league. So it's having the same effect in that, why would I take a guy at 5 overall when I can come back in the 2nd or 3rd round and still get a guy who's going to be really good? So I think that the driving force is different, but the effect might be the same, which might be behind the relative slides of guys like CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy last year.
And you get into recency bias of, well, the Titans found A.J. Brown in the 2nd round. The football team found Terry McLaurin in the 3rd round, right? You get into, and Justin Jefferson was the 4th wide receiver off the board last year. So while there is some truth about, they're harder to project, and but there's also a history of recent top wide receivers in the draft class not being the top 1, 2, or 3 guys off the board. And it is easier historically, or it's safer to take a tackle in the 1st round, I guess. I guess it's harder. You can still miss on tackles, but it is harder to find a starter in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round as a tackle or a good player. But it's easier to find a wide receiver in the 2nd or 3rd round historically. So that's why I do think receivers tend to drop. Which means this next chunk of receivers we're going to break down here. Rashad Bateman at 17 on our board. Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss at 22. And then Terrace Marshall at 28 out of LSU. Absolutely, these guys could end up in the 2nd round. Bateman listed at 6'2", 210 is really 6 feet 190. I honestly think that completely changes his projection.
I love that I love the images that he's been steadily shrinking since high school. Like high school,
he was
listed
6'3" in high school,
then 6'2" in college in Minnesota, and now 6 foot.
His height is Lane Kiffin's coaching career. It's in reverse.
Or the Raiders draft, when you just turn it upside down, it looks great.
So Bateman, one of those guys when you watch him, he does everything really well.
Do you think that genuinely completely changes his entire eval?
I do, and so
hang on. The height thing is one thing. He also came in 10 pounds underweight, but he apparently lost a bunch of weight during having COVID or battling COVID and never sort of put it all back on. So allegedly his weight was actually right.
I think it's
just
the
that he
height
never got
thing.
back to that weight.
I think it's the height thing that gets me a little bit. And it's stupid, but this was Daniel Jeremiah tweeted maybe a couple months ago where he didn't have official heights and weights. Right. And he was like, man, I hate this. I hate having official heights and weights when I'm watching a prospect. And on one hand, I'm like, come on, man, you don't need those, right? You don't need to know if a guy's 6'4" versus 6'2" if you're watching a defensive end. Just tell me, does he shed blocks? Does he do this or that? And then I found myself doing the same thing with Bateman because I think Bateman first caught my eye because he was making incredible contested catches at Minnesota. And it's like, okay, he wins at the catch point. And then you see him get off the line of scrimmage and he just does everything pretty well. And I think it's if he's a 6'2" receiver doing all this stuff, I trust that he can win at the catch point more against bigger corners. And I trust that, wow, if he's moving that well at 6'2", that's impressive for a big guy. Then all of a sudden he's a 6 foot receiver and it's like, oh man, that's not as exciting.
So I think it's kind of relevant when, particularly with smaller school guys, remember when we got burned with the other Michael Thomas?
Yeah.
Who was a monster at, where is it, Southern Miss?
Southern Miss.
And looked big. He looked like a big, legit number 1 receiver at Southern Miss, was going up, mossing people, just dominant. Now, he's still in the league, but he's kind of clung on at the ass end of a bunch of different rosters. But the point is, suddenly when you got to the NFL, you're like, whoa, where did that guy's size go? It's he doesn't look big anymore. Yeah. He looks small, in fact. So I think there's something to, the lower down you go, the easier it is to look like a large human compared to some of these other guys. But Bateman was doing that in the Big Ten. It shouldn't be that dramatically different. He's going up against some legit top NFL caliber bodies and looked, in some games looked like a big number 1 receiver, and some other games weirdly looked smaller. But I find it more difficult to believe that he'll get to the NFL and have the same issue in terms of like disappearing and suddenly looking way smaller, given the conference he was doing it in.
Yeah, and let's look. I'm not completely changing my tune on Bateman. It's just funny how those things play with your head, right?
Yeah.
His contested catch percentage in his career. Or over the last couple of years is one of the best that we've seen against recent NFL prospects in his entire career. It's about middle of the pack. I think he can win at the catch point. He does have good ball skills. And contested catches, it's not just stuff for 6'4" and 6'5" receivers. We've seen Stephon Diggs be one of the league's best, Michael Thomas. We've seen Antonio Brown. Those guys are some of the best at the catch point.
But also it's funny how sometimes players are just different size than you think they are in terms of playing. Like DeAndre Hopkins feels like a 6'3", 220-pound receiver. The dude's 6'1" and like 210. Like he's not big tremendously.
No, but he plays huge.
Like remember, you know, the Hail Mary play, right? Where there's a sea of hands and DeAndre Hopkins is the guy in the middle. The glove picture, you know, the marketing money deal. Like DeAndre Hopkins is the guy that elevated the most, got the catch, won the jump ball, and really shouldn't have. If you sort of just pull out the heights and weights of everybody in that little group, no way DeAndre Hopkins should have been the guy getting on the end of that catch. But he plays bigger than his size. So I think you can certainly make the argument that Bateman does. You can definitely make the argument that Jamar Chase does as well.
We have a really cool projection system. It's all part of PFF IQ. So if you're an NFL team and you haven't heard our PFF IQ pitch yet, hit me up. But it's going around the league right now. Teams are starting to invest in this product, which is fueled by a lot of the work that Eric Eager has done in the R&D team. And I think one of the best things that they do is the way we've looked at measurables. Right now, all over the internet, when guys work out, pro day, no combines, but there's pro day, and you see there's all these different athleticism percentages and rankings and 1 to 10 rankings and all this stuff. But what Eric has done, I think, is fantastic because he hasn't, when we look at measurables, we don't tell you how good of an athlete the guy is because that might not matter how good of an athlete he is. We tell you how his measurables translate to on-field performance, which is the most important thing. So the way they've studied measurables, the PFF R&D team has said, guys that work out in this manner generally project like X at the NFL level. So if you just took this guy's measurables, here's how he would go and project in the NFL against everybody else that worked out in a similar manner. So like DeAndre Hopkins is a really good example because he's big and he had a pretty good 3-cone and the other stuff was actually average or below average. DeAndre Hopkins has a great combine score for us. And I haven't seen his athleticism percentiles or spark score or anything. I imagine it's average at best. But our grade is great because guys who worked out like Hopkins at his size historically performed well. I say all that to say Bateman is dead smack in the middle as far as combine score goes. And I have a feeling if he did the same thing at 6'2", 210,
it'd be higher.
It'd be much higher, you know, because it would just be like, wow, this guy moves as such at this size. Historically, that's generally a good thing. But it was also a way to pitch, you know, the great work that our R&D team is doing and how we're studying the combine. So anyway, Bateman, he's got great releases. He does a lot of good stuff. I think he's a good mid-first round type of guy, but if he ends up in the 20s, if all these guys end up 10 to 15 spots lower than we have them, wouldn't be surprised for how we value these guys. Elijah Moore at 22, I know you've already mentioned, hey, maybe not a guy that could play on the outside. Maybe a slot only. Wouldn't necessarily take him in the first round. Terrace Marshall, you know, came in for us as a fringe first rounder, ends up at 28 overall. And then I think the two really interesting guys next 7 and 8 on our wide receiver board, Rondale Moore at 33 overall on the board, Kadarius Toney overall at 39. Two similar players, not in size necessarily, but in how they just weapons with the ball in their hands.
Yeah, that sort of group of slot receivers is all about how you project their ability to do more than that at the next level. Slot receiver is good, it's useful, it's valuable, but what we've been saying before is that you can take a good wide receiver, move him to the slot, and achieve exactly the same thing. So it's not a valuable position to draft because you can fill the role with whoever you already have. So for guys like Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, Kadarius Toney in particular, it's projecting, can they win outside and do more than just be a slot receiver? Because if they can't, then it's tough to justify having them above people that you think can, or even just people that can be decent outside on their own, because the logic is you can move that guy into the slot and do it all. So I know Mike Renner from 2for1 Drafts likes Elijah Moore's ability to do that. We've got a lunch bet on it.
You have a lunch bet,
like our Brandon Graham bet that you owe me,
or like your 40 bet.
Yeah,
you're up what, 50
Well, that
bucks
was
on
money, so this is just lunch.
Oh, it's lunch, yeah. Make it a $50 lunch.
Yeah. But so we have a bet. He thinks that Elijah Moore can play outside. I would default to the idea that he can't, on the basis that we have never seen it, and actually there's a reasonable amount of evidence that his own team doesn't think he could do it with the way they were deploying him. Rondale Moore, the scare is the dude's just so small. Like, for him to be able to win outside consistently would be pretty freakish given his size and all those kinds of things.
It's another 2-inch difference compared to
List. And the list is
from
already
the list.
really small.
Rondale was listed at 5'9". He's actually 5'7".
Yeah.
And Renner brought up
Which
catch
would be
radius.
genuinely unprecedented.
Catch radius does matter. I mean, just another way to like prop up Tom Brady. Throwing to Wes Welker and Danny Amendola and some of the smaller receivers all the time, and how many times Brady actually put the ball right on the front number for catch and run opportunities. And if he missed a little bit, like, those guys were not catching the ball. They didn't have that catch radius or anything like that. So the smaller the receivers are, the more accurate you need your quarterback to be.
But also, there's a 4-inch difference in height between Rondale Moore and Jalen Waddle, who's a small receiver. Like, it's a huge, like, he's so small. What he would, in order for him to actually consistently succeed on the outside, would be so freakish given his size. So, I mean, he's one of the most intriguing players because his college career peaked when he was 18. B, he is so small, and C, his role never progressed beyond like gimmick. Like, he was such a freak athlete, and it's Purdue, right? So you don't have too many of those. So we're going to build the entire offense around just getting him the ball in whatever the hell way we can. That's the system. Like, the NFL isn't doing that for you. So you either need to have your role either becomes massively shrunk, like it stays the same, we just don't have that as a big part of our offense, or you need to do more things. And that's the thing. It's like, what other things can Rondale Moore do in addition to what he's been doing?
Using our draft board as a proxy, because that's what we're doing, our number 10 receiver is Diami Brown. 45 overall on our draft board. So that's 10 receivers we have in our top 45. Again, these guys will go lower overall, I think, than our perception, because the NFL doesn't value receivers as much as we do. But the drop-off is from 45 in Brown to 71 in Josh Palmer, another 6'2", big-bodied type of receiver out of Tennessee, wins at the catch point. But there's a drop-off from Brown out of UNC to Palmer at Tennessee. He's 77. And then there's four more guys in our top 100. Tylan Wallace is the guy at 103 that I find intriguing, but I'm most intrigued by the fact that he's just been a productive deep threat in the Big 12 who wins at the catch point. It's scary, but he's got multiple years of just awesome production, and I think he could be a mid-round guy to keep an eye on.
The director of the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy, was just talking up Josh Palmer on Twitter today. He was like, the NFL loves guys that succeed against other NFL guys, and Palmer is one of 2 receivers, I think, this past year that had a 20-yarder or more against Patrick Surtain.
Look at you turning things around quickly. That was impressive.
So, Palmer is an intriguing guy to go higher. Again, particularly because that gap between, Palmer at 71, I guess Bateman, or Marshall at 28 on our board, it's a bunch of smaller guys. So the draft is interesting because there isn't that much size in there. So if you do covet 6'2 plus, those longer, bigger receivers, you might see some of those guys jump a little bit higher than you think they should based off what we've seen from them or their overall sort of skill set in a vacuum, because so many of these guys are actually smaller.
I'm sad that the Seattle Seahawks don't have a first-round pick this year, because they always end up picking somebody that is completely unexpected. So I always now I'm trying to pick.
Maybe they'll trade back in.
Maybe they will. Maybe like Josh Palmer would be the guy. I mean, if Nagy loves him, former Seahawks scout.
Did you see the article? Damn it, who was it by? Was it Kalen Keller? Somebody who was saying that the draft pool this year is tiny because of the 5th year that the NCAA has given.
Yeah,
players to go back.
I don't think it matters though.
So
because most guys just aren't going to, like, all the guys that went back to school weren't going to be drafted or signed anyway, probably.
Maybe. Well, yeah. So
there's a few. Maybe
the main point made was that the 6th, 7th round and undrafted free agent pool is going to be interesting this year. Guys that shouldn't have been drafted essentially are going to go in the 6th and 7th round because there's nobody else. And next year there's going to be like 3,000 available players, and you're going to be getting like good players comparatively in the 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th round undrafted.
Yeah,
so,
I honestly don't know if it's going to make a huge difference. I mean, she was saying it was over like 1,500 players.
Yeah, so the numbers is that like each year generally over 1,500 guys sign with an agent, which is the measurement for like think they have a shot at turning pro. This year it was like 600. So there's basically 1,000 players aren't there that usually are.
Yeah, but I imagine 800, 850 of those guys?
Yes. So which was translating,
would never sniff the NFL anyway.
Which was translating to essentially a 20 to 30% reduction in teams' undrafted board, right? So the way she was describing it is most teams have 2 boards. They have the one organized for guys you think are going to be drafted, and then you have like the priority undrafted free agent board, the guys you want to go targeting after the chaos disappears. And she was saying that this sort of 1,000 fewer players essentially translates to a reduction of like a quarter of the undrafted board. So a quarter of the guys you normally would target are not there.
Yeah, it says by mid-April of 2019, over 1,900 players had signed with an NFL agent.
Yeah.
Over 1,900. Last year it was over 1,800. This year it's 657. I would also potentially argue.
Did I name the right person? We'll give her credit.
Kaylin Kaler.
There you go.
Collar. Oh man, stop making me pronounce names live.
I just wanted to make sure I was actually
MMQB SI
right
now.
Human.
Good job, Kaylin. 657 this year. I would also argue of those 1,800 players that signed with agents last year, none of those guys got shots. Very few of those guys actually got those, camp looks or preseason games. So if there's a small pool of undrafted free agents this year, or priority undrafted free agents, you could tap into last year's group who maybe didn't get a shot because you couldn't give them a shot because there just weren't as many roster spots. So I do think it offsets a little bit, but it is an insightful piece and something I don't think people had really thought about.
Yeah.
They're calling them super seniors, Sam. All the guys that are going back next year. That's what the
3 different classes next year.
Yeah.
The underclassmen, the seniors, and the super seniors.
For a company that has to maintain a database of football players, and it is really a massive issue for us over here at PFF.
And it causes some real acronym issues as well. You don't want to be shortening things to SS.
No, that's right. I think you used to do that with secret superstar pieces that we did.
Until I discovered that that's the thing you really don't want to be shortening.
I think I made the phone call to you. I was like, Sam, let's not do that.
Yeah.
Let's not make that the name.
Yeah,
if we could. So SU seniors, super seniors. Sus. All right, let's go to other position groups here.
That's much better.
We won't spend much time. We have no fullbacks on our top board here.
No fullbacks.
Well, I'll tell you who the fullback is when we get to the tight ends. I will tell you who the fullback is when we discuss the tight ends. There's a guy who is the next juice check in this class.
Juice check?
Juice check.
Surely that's not a
juice
hard
check.
J?
Juice check. That's his nickname. Juice check.
Okay.
Kyle, the fullback from the 49ers. All right, let's go to running backs for 2 minutes. I want to do a whole daily on the running backs because we're always like team needs and who's going to go in the first and we haven't mentioned one running back in this NFL draft ever other than saying LOL, don't take one. By the way, Pittsburgh radio, when I'm on yesterday, I convinced the hosts of the show running back isn't the way to go. Wow. They're all about it. But the fans...
They're going to take one, though.
Oh, yeah, they are. The fans are all in on a running back in Pittsburgh. We got to get back to ground and pound and the whole thing.
It's not just the fans. I told you this yesterday that I can't remember who it was, but somebody, like a beat reporter for the Steelers, tweeted out essentially based off the information they're hearing and the discussions of people and essentially handicapped the likely draft picks for them in the first round. And it was Najee Harris, Travis Etienne. I stop it.
You can do it the right way.
Travis Etienne, Landon Dickerson, and who was the fourth?
Asante.
Yeah,
right?
Asante Samuel Jr. Though not in that order. I think Asante was ahead of Dickerson, but 2 running backs essentially were the top 2 targets. So it would be very Steelers for them to watch what's happened over the last few years and come to the conclusion that losing an all-pro running back is the root of all of our problems. rather than the offensive line that was once the best in the NFL or one of the best collapsing.
And look, I'm not saying that like fan reaction is how teams think, but sometimes teams do think about their own history so much. And I do think, I always joke about, well, the Steelers, they keep drafting centers and they start for 10 years. There's definitely somewhere in that building in Pittsburgh where they're saying, okay, we drafted Pouncey in the first round. We got 10 years out of him. It's what we do in Pittsburgh. We have a great history of drafting centers. Like, that actually matters. Like, it doesn't matter how well you drafted centers in the 70s, 80s, 90s, or 10 years ago. It really doesn't. But there's probably something about, we might as well just take the next center, Landon Dickerson. So I could see that being a discussion.
That would be a way better solution than taking a running back.
I'm just saying, like, the thought process that's getting them to this point is fascinating to me. And then you have the two running backs as the option, where the most recent thing that we saw was Big Ben threw the ball 100 times against the Browns, 68 times, right, in the playoff game. And it's like, we can't win like that. We can't win asking old Big Ben to throw the ball. We want him to throw the ball 20 times a game. So we have to revamp the run game. We can't rely on the pass game. We got to draft a running back. Who are the top two? It's Najee and it's ETN, or is it? Those are the two not surprising names to me. And then Asante Samuel's not surprising because I think he's a perfect fit for them. I would draft him there.
Again, that's a much better pick than a running back. And the two non-running backs on that list, I think, are fine picks. If they went in that direction, I wouldn't criticize. I think Asante, I'm torn a little bit on Samuel. We'll get to him later. But Dickerson would fill that need, would be the right way to address the problem that they are trying to fix. It's just running back is not addressing the root problem that you're trying to fix. It isn't. It's not like it's seeing a symptom. It's treating the symptom as opposed to the root cause of the disease.
So it's 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh. It's my favorite radio hit of the week. I do it every Thursday. And those guys, I mean, it's talk radio. They get the hot takes out of me. And I was like, guys, listen, I hedge on everything. I'm not a hot take artist. You know, our listeners know I don't stand on too many ledges. I pick my spots. But in Pittsburgh, they got me trashing Marquise. They got me trashing Bud, telling the fans, don't draft a running back. You'll be picking in the top 10 next year, looking for your next quarterback. They get the worst out of me on that show.
We had an interesting email in the bulging mailbag as part of the in between all of the millions of screenshots of people subscribing. There was a guy essentially saying that the Steelers appear to have changed their intended or their strategy for how they've been team building over the last couple of years, and it sort of screams a lot that they're trying to do what the Saints did, you know, one last Super Bowl with Big Ben while we still have him. Running back would again kind of scream that, right? It's like this is the issue, like fix that, Big Ben, take the pressure off him, one more championship.
The difference there though is the Saints, I don't want to say stumbled into, but the Saints' run coincided with one of the most incredible draft classes in history in 2017. The Saints, it wasn't just that they saddled up. The Bucs essentially had a really good roster, and then they said, okay, bring in Gronk and bring in Antonio Brown and bring the band back together. The Bucs are doing that more than anybody, I think. Whereas the Saints just happen to have an incredible 2017 draft class that, you know, helped fuel this turnaround. This might be two shows trying to break down the draft board here. Where are we? All right, let's go back to running backs. The number one running back on our board. We have a new number one, Sam.
Oh, yeah?
It's Javonte Williams out of UNC. And he's 53rd on our board. And again, there would be some in the building who wouldn't have a running back above 100.
Yes.
But Javonte Williams, special player. We had today's PFF NFL Dailies, great, I think, because we went and broke down some of the critical factors for the class, some of the most important numbers for the draft class, an article that I wrote at PFF.com. So another feature of PFF IQ where you isolate the stable metrics for each position and the unstable ones. So for running backs, the most stable metrics, if you are going to evaluate running backs, it's what do they do above and beyond their run blocking. And Javonte Williams has forced a missed tackle every 0.39 carries, which doesn't sound like anything to most of our listeners. But when you put it into context, it's number one. If you go back to every running back since 2014 and you say, what did they do, and guys that have played in the NFL, and we have college data on, back to 2014, take that entire list. This is the highest missed tackle rate of any of those running backs.
Wow.
David Montgomery was number one previously. But Javonte Williams forces missed tackles better than any running back we've seen of the PFF era in college. And that's the best thing that translates at the next level.
Oh, sorry. Just trying to find the name of the guy that asked that or suggested that thing about the Steelers. Mark Lambros.
He's a multi-email guy, I think.
Okay.
Been in here a few times.
Anyway, he's the guy that suggested that. I just wanted to give him credit.
Cool. Javonte Williams. So he had a late push up the draft board. Also, your buddy ETN down to 66. He's now third on the board. He also...
Is it because we hate his name?
It could be. In our critical factors, he averaged 4.5 yards after contact per rush in his career. That is best in the draft class and number 2 when compared to recent NFL prospects. ETN, I got to check his workout numbers. He didn't have that special workout that I think people expected, but he's got that just on-field speed. He reminds me a lot of Dalvin Cook from that respect, where it's just he always looked like one of the fastest players on the field.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook's workout is still one of the biggest unexplained things to me. I don't understand how that guy didn't run a 4.3 something.
When we have better on-field speed measures,
like actual tracking data as opposed to just workout numbers.
Even if we can do that retroactively to college, I think we'll find Dalvin's way faster than those numbers.
I'm 100% sure he's way faster. That's why it's an unexplained. I don't understand how that guy ran a 4.4 something.
ETN ran 4.41, and they both. I think when they're on the field, they just look 4.3. They just look faster than everybody on the field. So I think there's that big play element to ETN's game. And then Najee Harris did jump him, and he's at 65 on the board, one spot ahead of Travis of Clemson. And Najee Harris, incredible ball skills. I think the way you described Josh Jacobs a couple years ago, and another running back out of Bama, just the way he tracks the ball and catches it. Only 3 drops on 83 catchable in his career. I love Najee in the pass game. And he's 230, man. Right.
He's huge. I mean, he's just a big-bodied human, 6'2", 230, with that sort of length and receiving skills and just, the catch radius, the ability to make plays all around him. Like, he's a fascinating running back.
Do you think he feels 230? Does he look like a big bruiser to you?
No, I mean he carries it well. You know what I mean? Like he's just a big-bodied guy that because he's that large is 230. It's like it's like you, Steve, right? You don't look like a 285-pound man. You carry it well because you're so tall.
Thanks, Sam.
You're welcome. It's like so you won't know this because you're this size, right? But for normal humans,
wait. I would argue I've been your size before.
True.
99.9% of our listeners, I've been whatever height you are.
You probably weren't focusing
on
these things though because they don't come along very often.
Yeah. I also may have been your height for like a day.
Yeah, certainly not outside of the States. But when you see these guys that are like 7 foot, most of them look wrong. You know what I mean? Like their proportions are off. There aren't that many well-proportioned 7 foot tall people, right?
Sure.
But you are actually you're just scaled up. You're a normal proportioned human. You're just longer and wider than the rest of us, right?
Thanks.
But you scale correctly, whereas most of these guys don't. My point is that
the
Najee
nicest
Harris,
thing you've ever said to me.
My point is that Najee Harris is the same, right? He's just scaled up. It's not out of proportion. You haven't like put on the weight. You're not chunky because you're 230. You're just a larger than normal running back, and because of that, you're 15 pounds heavier than most of them.
I'm still taken aback that you complimented me like that.
I mean, I wouldn't.
You should have added that to my Hall of Fame induction speech.
I mean,
which you did have to make, by the way.
It's a pretty low bar when my compliment of you is you're a normally proportioned human.
Take what I can get.
Just longer than the rest of us.
I take what I can get. The other 2 running backs that land in the top 100, Michael Carter, another running back from UNC, another guy that's very elusive, Khalil Herbert out of Virginia Tech at 91. The intriguing name to know is at 120. It's Kenneth Gainwell. He opted out this season, but he might be one of the best pure receivers for among running backs in this draft. So keep an eye on Gainwell. And if you're into dynasty or dynasty drafts, I drafted Gainwell last year. I already got him sitting on my bench for when he gets drafted and becomes a nice little receiving threat out of the backfield. So just keep an eye on him. Do you have anything else to add on the receivers? My guy Demetric Felton just worked out horribly and made me sad.
Abysmally. Like was amongst the lowest percentile players in either position, right? He's this wide receiver / running back hybrid, which is the thing that everybody wants to get right now.
Yeah.
Only he was so staggeringly bad as an athlete. It's like, I don't know if we can even draft you anymore. What is that?
Sad is
It
what
really
it was.
is.
He
Like,
looked faster and quicker and everything. Maybe he'll still be a good football player.
He
but
was listed as a wide receiver with the athletic scores. And you're like, oh, well, maybe if you change it to running back again, it helps. No, it was only marginally less inept as a running back. So that was really disappointing.
Wait, let me check. I haven't checked his combine score yet.
I mean, I imagine it will be pretty catastrophic on the basis that
Depends
it
on
was.
what position we have him at, too.
I mean,
his measurables: 10 bench press reps, 14th percentile vertical. I'm in the wrong spot, but a little sad.
Yeah,
We'll see what his rushing. So yeah, the other cool part about our combine scores here. Again, they project two facets. So a running back will have a different combine score as a runner than he'll have as a receiver, than he'll have as a pass blocker. And obviously, athleticism means probably nothing for pass blockers, so it won't be weighted heavily in our projections.
The one good thing.
Yeah, definitely low-end combine score here.
The one good thing for Felton is that he had a really high elusive rating, which, as you know, Steve, is one of the most predictive things we have.
Elusive rating, yeah, that's good. Math genius, Sam. Yeah, and so Felton's receiving combine score is much better than his rushing combine score. And we've got some comp. We have a Dexter McCluster comp in there from a statistical comparison.
That's interesting.
Darren Sproles shows up. 2016 Sproles, so that's when he's like 38. Trent Richardson, 2014, as a receiver. These are receiving comps. Frank Gore, 2007.
Richardson could catch.
And Leonard Fournette, 2017.
But he could catch the ball.
Yeah. I love that Leonard Fournette and Trent Richardson show up on the same comp list for receivers. Anyway, let's get that's enough on the running backs. There's some decent ones. Don't take any in the first round. Grab them sometime around round 3 at the earliest. Let's go to tight ends. You have Kyle Pitts at 5. We've spoken about him a ton. He's at 5. We don't have another tight end on our fresh big board until 55, and that's Pat Freiermuth. I think he's soured on Renner a little bit more and more as we've gone. He's gotten the baby Gronk moniker. Oh man, now I'm losing my mind. The Notre Dame tight end that the Bears drafted last year,
Cole Kmet.
Yeah, Cole Kmet he had some late buzz last year because he was the only tight end in the class that could actually line up in line and block somewhat. I thought Freiermuth would get some of that. The guy that's actually getting some of that buzz is Hunter Long from BC, really productive tight end. He's 4th on our overall board, 121 on the 4th on the tight end board, 121 on the overall board. I'll give you the juice check comp in a second here, but any thoughts on the tight ends?
Yeah, the tight ends features one of the best names in the draft, and I'm very high on a couple of players in the entire draft who have awesome names and should be drafted at least day 2 based off the name alone. There is a tight end in this draft named Tommy Tremble, which is just a great name for
that's the next juice check.
Not even for a football player, just for a human.
Yeah.
Tommy Tremble is how somebody has decided, have a kid, what are we going to name this? Tommy Tremble. Yeah. Book it. Write it down.
Renner sent me a note.
Great name.
He sent me a note a couple months ago. He said, you have to go watch Tommy Tremble's big time blocks. Big time blocks. So all our highest graded run blocks, most of them are on the move, like H-back type of blocks. He absolutely destroys people. And I said, this is your best fullback in the draft. This is the next Kyle Juszczyk. He added that note into the draft guide. If you have it, you can check it out on the Tommy Tremble page. But he's moved up to number 3. Somebody should have checked Renner's math here. The Notre Dame guy, of course. Golden Homer here. But he's an incredible run blocker in space. Pretty athletic guy, get to the second level and the whole thing. Wasn't targeted a whole lot in the pass game, but feels like a guy that will be a move tight end and be #fun to watch and maybe become a legend with some of his run blocks.
Ben is like live checking me on the ETN/Etienne name pronunciation thing, and apparently it's even more complicated than just pronouncing it correctly in French or the way it's being bastardized on broadcasts.
Really?
Because of the Deep South Louisiana Bayou issue. It's like a whole third thing that makes even less sense than either of the other ways it's being pronounced. So I think there should just be a moratorium on saying his name, ever.
So what's his name? What's the
Travis.
Travis E?
Just Travis.
Or Travis A?
He's going to go by a solo name. He is Travis, like the band.
All right, great. The other tight end to keep an eye on is Brevin Jordan, only 21 years old. He's really good with the ball in his hands. Not a great route runner necessarily, but he's shifty. He's another one of those guys. It's just tough, man. There's not a whole lot of tight ends in college football, right?
Or in the NFL.
The NFL has a tight end problem.
Shortage. Drought.
There's a shortage
tight
for sure.
Drought.
Yeah, especially once Gronk retires again, it just gets worse and worse. But there's a lot of the Bucs have 3 reasonable tight ends on their team, but there's other teams that have 0 and out of 3 that just aren't that good. So there is a tight end shortage around the league. I also think that's what makes Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, George Kittle maybe even more valuable. The fact when you do have one and the rest of the league does not, and maybe that makes Kyle Pitts even more valuable because the rest of the league doesn't have one.
Even if he is just a tight end, in air quotes. Like if you don't project him as any further than just a really good move tight end, that is still absurdly valuable if he's really good at that, a la Travis Kelce.
Like the Bengals have been trotting out the Drew Samples of the world and CJ Azomas and Tyler Kroft a few years ago.
There's a bunch of teams that just have no tight ends.
Yeah.
None.
And New England just stole 2 of them. Right? They had the worst tight end situation, and now they have Hunter Henry and John
it wasn't
New.
like they hadn't dedicated any like they drafted 2 third-rounders last year, right? And actually traded up to snag that. Like they had actually gone looking for tight ends and come up empty, and then went looking again with a $100 million in their pocket this time.
All right, let's go to the offensive line. We'll lump them all in as one. Tackles, guards, and centers. That's what the O-line is. We have 3, 4, 5.
You get really high-level analysis on this podcast.
Listen, sometimes you have new listeners. You don't know what. I'm also impressed with where we're getting emails from. China, Australia.
South Africa was one.
South Africa, Denmark, Sweden. I mean, we get them from all over the place. Yeah, now I'm making up countries, too, just to make it.
Have you looked at our demographics, by the way, on the anchor thing?
They're strong.
We have 13% of our listeners are from Ireland.
That's all you, man.
I know. That's a large number of people.
That's good.
That should be more people than there are in Ireland. I'm not sure how that number is that high.
There's more people listening to our podcast just from Ireland than
are in Ireland. Yeah.
I won't even say it. Anyway, 7 offensive linemen in our top 32. All tackles, depending on how you want to. Well, Vera Tucker is more of a guard, but he's played tackle. So we'll say 6 tackles in a guard. Penei Sewell, number 1 at Oregon. Rashawn Slater at Northwestern. He's at 11 overall. Christian Darrisaw at 15. Then for tackles, Vera Tucker's at 21. But then all the tackles show up late first round. Walker Little from Stanford. Tevin Jenkins from Oklahoma State, 31. Dylan Rayduns from North Dakota State at 32. There's also a big chunk of tackles in the second round, and we get a few guards and centers mixed in there as well. It does seem like a good spot to grab a first-round tackle and to grab some depth all along the offensive line in rounds 2 and 3 potentially.
Yeah, though it also feels like it's quite deep at tackle as well. Like there's a definite drop-off after those first-round guys, but it does feel I'm on Indianapolis radio every week. And
how's that go?
Massive tackle need, and it's one of the things they always ask every week. What if they go this way? What if they go a different position? What happens if they wait on tackle? And this is the really interesting thing about the Colts this offseason is they've been playing this game of chicken at the left tackle position, haven't yet made any moves, haven't gone out and done anything crazy. They're just biding their time, assuming that the pieces will fall in place and they'll get the guy they need. And a lot of people are saying that that'll be in the first round. They're in the right kind of area. They could get one of those lower first-round tackles. But if they do get enamored with a different position, whether it's wide receiver, whether it's edge rusher, whether it's cornerback, I still think that they can look at that and say, look at the board and think, we've got a reasonable shot of securing a starting left tackle with our next pick. Maybe they come back and get a Samuel Cosme or an Alex Leatherwood and think, yeah, we get that and a Jason Oweh or whatever in the first round. It's actually a win. It's better than the first round tackle plus whoever.
Yeah, I think those debates are healthy and good, and I think that's what's happening in NFL draft rooms, right? They're trying to figure out where's the depth in round 2 and 3 where I can fill needs. And I think ultimately you don't want to fill needs, and that's why you want the board. You want the value to be there. On the other hand, I think some of these tackles that we have in the 20s could go top 15. If the right team is there. Like if the Bengals take Penei Sewell, if the Panthers take, say, Rashawn Slater, some of the other tackle-needy teams, I mean, are the Giants going to take another tackle? Who knows? I mean, they've got questions on the O-line. Are other teams going to take – I think New England could be very unexciting. If it's just business as usual in New England and they don't go quarterback or the quarterbacks are gone, they're just going to grab a tackle. Ugh. Yeah. The Vikings need a tackle at 14. The Patriots – the old Patriots way would say, Trent Brown, starting right tackle, 1 year left on his contract, get the next starting tackle. Do that this year, a year in advance. Patriots could take a tackle at 15. So that's where Ray Duns, Tevin Jenkins, Walker Little, those guys could be much higher than expected. From a PFF standpoint, you've got Walker Little's the guy that I have the biggest question marks about. Renner loves him from just a pure traits and movement skills and the whole thing. He's only played under 900 snaps. He's only 800 something snaps,
and not for a while.
And not for a while. He opted out of 2020. He played 72 snaps because of injury in 2019. Played 790 in 2018. It was 69 grade, so not great. So Walker Little is a pure projection from a production standpoint. On the other hand, you have a Tevin Jenkins from Oklahoma State. 3 straight grades of getting better and better. 92 grade last year at Oklahoma State. Just a guy to keep an eye on there.
Another one of the best names in the draft. Number 62 on the big board from Oklahoma, Creed Humphrey. What a name.
4-year starter at center? He's been starting at center for a while for Oklahoma. I thought you were going to go number 51 on the board.
No.
Quinn?
Creed Humphrey, I'm in.
Anything else to add from this
so
O-line
I'm curious
class?
What effect Zach Wilson will have on some of the supporting cast at BYU. So there's one of his wide receivers is in this draft. Some of that, like the big criticism everyone has about Zach Wilson is, well, look at what this offensive line was doing. Nobody ever got anywhere near this guy to cause him any kind of problems for us to see if he can handle pressure. So his tackle, Brady Christensen, is in this draft. Now, there would have been a lot of people whose eyes were on Brady Christensen's tape that wouldn't ordinarily have been because of Zach Wilson. I wonder if that boosts him up a little bit because just more eyes were on him. Now, he had some questions himself, like, okay, it wasn't just him being amazing that allowed the wall in front of Zach Wilson to be there. It was also that he wasn't facing anybody that was particularly challenging. But I am curious to see if there's any kind of Zach Wilson coattails effect to his supporting cast this year. Like if we see a few BYU guys get, I guess, overdrafted in quotation marks, like guys that get boosted a little bit based off that.
Brady Christensen, 24 years old, is probably the biggest question. 96th grade last year at tackle. Fantastic. Only gave up 3 pressures the entire season. But as you said, didn't have to face a whole lot of people. The last time he faced really decent edge rushers was Utah last year. Didn't look great. It gets a little lungy in the whole thing. So that's where you do have to parse out the production grade with who they played. And again, age is only an issue if you're trying to look at a guy's production and use it as a positive, right? Age is not an issue saying, well, he's 24. It's not like he's going to be 40 by the time his next contract. It's not like Brandon Weeden. It's not about what he's going to be 4 years from now. It's that here's a grown man playing against young men, and if you're using production to say he's the best, as our grades would indicate, you would say, okay, there's an advantage there. Yeah, this guy should be in year 3 in the NFL.
It's 2 different things. I think it's one, what you're saying, which is because you are older and more developed physically, you had an advantage over the kids that you were beating up.
Right.
And then 2, if you are trying to project growth.
Correct.
Development, getting better at the next level. If the dude is 24 or 25, you have to take most of that away because there isn't that potential. He's already fully grown, essentially. He's already maxed out in terms of size, height, weight, all those kinds of things. You're not anticipating a growth element that you might for a guy who's only 20 or 21, who's still got room to grow and room to actually develop physically. So it is relevant. I think it's something that you need to factor in, but shouldn't necessarily be a determining factor either way.
Yeah, I think that's just that's me answering the question. Hey, Brady Christensen, 96 overall grade, number one among tackles last year. Why is he number 74 on our draft board?
Right.
Because of competition questions and age questions. However, if I'm a tackle needy team, or if I'm a team like the Jaguars that has a 1-year franchise tag on Cam Robinson, I would love to grab Brady Christensen on maybe late day 2, whatever it might be, wherever he's available, and you might steal a starting tackle from him because he could be that good. All right, let's go to the defensive side of the ball here. So offensive line-wise, some tackles in the first round, some depth. Best guard is Elijah Vera Tucker. The next, but he's got some tackle skills. And the next pure guard is Quinn Miners and Wyatt Davis at number 61 out of Ohio State. Davis disappointed just a touch last season. Landon Dickerson's our top center on the board. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Start on the defensive line. You want to combine edge and interior D-line?
Okay.
Let's do that. So it's an interesting one because the top interior defensive lineman on the board is Christian Barmore, who we've talked up quite a bit here. We gave him a late push up to number 12 on the draft board. There is not an interior defensive lineman until 54 after that. Our guy Timo on PFF.com, really interesting article about how public draft boards value players versus the NFL. And what he found is that the public draft boards value interior defensive linemen more than the NFL. And I think I'm guilty as well. There was a couple years ago, it seemed like a great class of defensive tackle prospects, and they dropped a lot.
Who's wrong, though? Like, is the NFL I don't think values pressure from the interior as much as they do pressure on the edge. And the data, in fairness, kind of backs them up in terms of edge pressure is more valuable, but a huge amount of that is essentially the boost factor from strip sacks. All right, you're more likely to get a strip sack coming from the blind side around the edge than you are coming up the middle where the quarterback sees it coming the whole way. So I think that explains a lot of it, in which case if you find a guy that can consistently generate pressure inside, Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, whoever it is, like that is insanely valuable. But I don't think the NFL values those guys as much as, a top-tier edge rusher still.
See, I think part of it, and I'm biased in how I watch film. At PFF, we do it differently. And because we've graded every run play, I think early in big board building, you would get this guy that had a 90 run defense grade and a pretty good pass rush grade and just think, okay, the NFL is going to think he's a first-round player. I actually think that the NFL has done a pretty good job of not overvaluing run defense in this equation. And I think that they value edges. They value those guys more. Those guys pop a little bit more from an athleticism standpoint. I also wonder if there just hasn't been great interior D-line prospects because you're chasing an Aaron Donald, so you want to see a guy that looks like him. So it's an Ed Oliver or Quinnen Williams. I mean, those guys are rare coming out of college the last few years. So I think, and then I think Josh Hermsmeyer on Twitter made the point, and I think he might be overthinking it too because he's coming from a more analytical angle that we are. He was saying maybe evaluators, overvalue what they're confident in. And from a PFF standpoint, we are confident in our D-line grades, very confident. They are some of the most stable things. So it would be in our nature to say the stability of this number makes me want to push this guy up the board. I don't know if your average evaluator, though, thinks that way at all. I don't think your average evaluator is like, man, my D-line grades are so much better than my corner grades. They just think they're good at everything or whatever it is. But it's interesting. But I think our board is catching up to where the NFL is, or this class just isn't that good as far as interior D-line go.
But one of the reasons I'm asking is because I know there's a lot of places that seem actually kind of low on Christian Barmore, certainly compared to us. Even factoring in the idea that this is a weak interior defensive line class, like there are people saying that guy's not a first-round caliber player, let alone the first guy top 10 potentially based off where we have it.
Well, the other thing that could have screwed up all of Timo's numbers was just Maurice Hurst. I mean, we had him at 3 on our board. Everybody else had him in the first round. Between him, here's what's Grady Jarrett. I think a lot of people had him as a first-round type of player, at least a second-round type of player. He went in the 5th. Maurice Hurst went in the 5th. Maybe it's just a couple guys screwing it up, but The question about Barmore is another snaps issue, 700-something snaps in his career. And he is the classic PFF breakout player. We do this every year with college players who had an elite type of grade on 200 snaps, 300 snaps. That was Barmore in 2019. 269 snaps, 87.8 grade. We write articles about this all the time and say, these are the guys to watch. These guys were awesome in a small sample size. You give them more playing time, they'll be great. Barmore has a 90 grade last year, but it was still 478 snaps. So we haven't seen it over a long period of time, but in that small sample, incredible pass rusher, good run defender.
Right. And, dominated in the national title game, like showed up in big games, looked phenomenal when he did. Given whatever about in a neutral year where there's a ton of talent at the position, given this season, or this draft rather, where there just isn't a huge amount of guys you think are going to be capable interior defensive linemen, I can't really understand not ranking Barmore very highly. Like, maybe he's not right up there as a top 5 player as the next whoever, Quinn and Williams, even in the same school, but he's really good. Like, and the potential is there, and the size, like all the other things that you normally tick are there. I don't quite understand being so low on him as some people are.
Yeah, so we have him up to 12 on the board. As I mentioned, that at 54 is Alim McNeil, completely different type of player. It's only a listed 10-pound difference, but Alim McNeil is more of a squattier. He's 6'2", 320. He's more of a squattier nose tackle type. Let me see what he measured in at. But I love the way he moves. He is an excellent run defender. Him and Tyler Shelvin from LSU are probably your top nose tackle type of candidates, but McNeil has a higher pass rush grade. So there's no Vita Vea in this class necessarily, but if you're chasing that type, a nose tackle that can maybe do a little bit from a pass rush standpoint, McNeil is your guy. And there is value in those type of players, right, on day 2 and into day 3.
But then, like, if you're looking for that sort of 3-tech interior pass rusher, you've got to go all the way to 73 on the big board from Milton Williams from Louisiana Tech. Like, if you're not getting Barmore in the first round and you need that, it's a long wait or a big projection to get that player. Again, I don't quite understand why that wouldn't alone cause you to jump all over Barmore in the first round somewhere.
And look at Milton Williams' size. He is
competition. The dude didn't exactly play a bunch of people. The best line he played was BYU, who, Zach Wilson and that BYU wall shut him down. So,
Milton Williams, 6'4", 278, and get that. That's a defensive end type of body. Did a lot of work on the edge and on the interior. 90+ grade at La Tech last year. So that would be definitely a name to watch. And he's a guy that we were early on just from a production standpoint. And I think from a draft board standpoint, a lot of other guys dropping down. Milton Williams number 3 on our board. And then we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more players in the top 100 on the defensive interior, all 78 or later. Marvin Wilson from Florida State may be the most disappointing one. He had back-to-back years of 90+. So remember, we've talked about this a lot. How do you handle this situation? Marvin Wilson's grades at Florida State, 90, 90, 67.
Yeah.
And he's now 94 on our draft board. 23 years old, be 23 because he's 22 now. He'll be 23. How do you handle that?
And you're on fire today between, one more than 22 is 23, and the offensive line consists of guards.
Sometimes you have to
centers.
explain. We have smart listeners, but sometimes you have to talk them through things. How do you view this type as, here's this guy that could be a steal if you get him in the 3rd round because he's showed it before? Or is it, this dude never progressed? It was only 229 snaps last year, but he didn't progress.
Right, which I think is big. Like the fact that it was a truncated playing time or amount of playing time for him, and you had seen better in the past. I think you can definitely go some way towards not necessarily dismissing it, but diminishing how much you lean on that.
Let's go to the edge. The story here is athletes. Kwity Paye, Jason Owe, Jalen Phillips, Azeez Ojulari from Georgia, and then Gregory Rousseau. They're our top 5 edges. The top 4 are all in the top 30 overall, so they're all first-round type of players for us. We have Rousseau at 37. What are your thoughts on the edge class here? Kwity Paye is our top, but only at number 24 on the draft board.
Athletes, as you say, is the calling card from the group, and also like lack of playing time and question marks. I mean, they all have red flags of varying degrees, whether it's injuries, whether it's just lack of playing, whether it's opting out of 2020 and not getting to see a development step. It's really, and that's why I think they're all sort of grouped together in that band of, well, we're not confident enough for them to be top 20 players in the draft, but there isn't much separating a lot of them either. It's just like pick your favorite athlete with the gamble, roll the dice, and see what you end up with at the end of it all. I think it's a fascinating group because of that, because you don't have this sort of great resume of extensive play and just linear progression and the things you want to see. There is no surefire Nick Bosa, Chase Young, just the perfect career that leads you to be confident about what they're going to be at the next level. It's the position that most embodies how much of an onus is on the sort of draft eval process this year, because strange year, COVID, no combines, all the sort of things that are getting rolled together in terms of this is a weird year to be evaluating players. I don't think any position embodies that more than edge rusher, and it's going to be like a real test of each team's scouting department. And I think because of that, this again might be the position that sees the most weird picks. Like somebody who goes in the first round that we're not even thinking about being that high, or a guy that we have in the first round drops like a day because enough teams are just out on the question marks.
Yeah, here are those potential scenarios. This usually happens at corner, because at corner you have all different some teams just want bigger, longer corners, some don't care, some want different styles, right? Zone corners, man corners, it usually happens there. Edge is potentially the place where it happens. We have Kwity Paye number 1. Now, I could see people having Jason Owe number 1, the most ridiculous pro day maybe of all time. Take it for what it's worth, but all of his numbers were insane. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're not just matching athleticism. We're saying, what does that do on the field? And Owe's pass rush projection is elevated massively by his workout. So in other words, it's one of the best pass rushing workouts we've ever seen for an edge. Now, Kwity Paye does not have one of the best pass rushing workouts that we've seen, but it's because he also didn't run a 20-yard shuttle or a 3-cone. He has a defensive back like 6'4", 6 was it? Or 6? A ridiculous 3-cone that he ran in college, but I don't know why he didn't do it this year.
Maybe because he's got that one.
Or just because he has it and he's bulked up to 261 and doesn't need it, whatever it is. But Kwity Paye would have been a higher athlete. We just don't have that number in the system. So it's an average pass rushing projection. So we have Paye number 1. I could see people having Jason Owe number 1. Mm-hmm. The boss, Chris Collinsworth, has Jalen Phillips number 1 from Miami. And honestly, if he didn't have concussion issues and a small sample size, he could be number 1 for us. I could see people loving Gregory Rousseau, who coming into the season at 6'6", 260, was expected to be a potential top 10 pick and was expected to had 16 sacks in 2019. So yeah, absolutely, this position.
I can see almost anybody in that top group. Like Azeez Ojulari has insane speed and bend and just that thing that everybody chases on the edge. That sort of Von Miller-esque ability to bend and get around a corner in as tight a situation as possible. He's maybe the best guy in the draft at that, but he's undersized. Carlos Basham Jr. put on a ton of size throughout his college career. He's now this like physical monster. Like anything down to there, which is like 42 on our big board, I could see a team convincing themselves that guy is the best edge rusher in this draft and taking him like with their first pick.
Rousseau is fascinating because he comes in at 6'7", over 260 pounds, but the workout itself wasn't great. He ran a good 40, well above average 40, which is attractive. When teams look at things, they just see it pops in their brain. Mm-hmm. A below average combine score, though, from a pass rush standpoint. And I'm mentioning combine score the most for edge rushers because it means the most for them. It factors into their projections the most. I wouldn't want to touch Rousseau in the first round. It would have to be late second for me, but I think the NFL, crazy length and size, I think they could still say the dude's hardly played any football. We can make this thing work. So the story of the edge class is what you said, right? We don't know who's going to go first. We don't know who's going to go. Right? It could be completely all over the place. What do we have? 5, 6, 7 guys in our top 50. The other guy who could sneak into the first round, Peyton Turner. Talk about like who would the Seattle Seahawks pick? Definitely number 58 on our draft board, Peyton Turner. Another 6'6", 270 length guy. He had an incredible workout. He could jump Rousseau in the NFL's mind.
91.7 grade last year against true pass sets. Like one of your critical factors, Steve.
That's
one
right.
of your most predictive numbers for edge rushers, essentially how they performed in the most honest pass rushing situations. He was pretty much as good as anybody.
So it's a fascinating position on the edge this year. One of the ones that is most stable, projecting from year to year, but we don't have a whole lot of elite grading players to be that confident in, and the NFL is going to be all over the place with these guys. All right, let's go to linebacker, and then we'll hit up the secondary. Linebacker, the clear top one for us is Micah Parsons. The wild card is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Linebacker by name, 215 pounds. Is he the next Fred Warner, overhang linebacker type? The question for him, hasn't played in the box a ton, right? In seeing the game from a linebacker standpoint. Question for Parsons, elite run defender, has been a pretty good coverage player, hasn't been challenged a ton. So those are the two guys we have first-round grades on, but they both have a couple questions to answer.
Yeah, and the one guy I really like that I think could potentially be a better player than he is a prospect is Nick Bolton, the linebacker from Missouri, who doesn't necessarily take all of the measurables and isn't the spectacular coverage player and all these kinds of things, but he, I think, embodies old school linebacker the most. You know, when people look at linebackers and they use the term instincts a lot, which probably is a misnomer when you're actually looking at stuff. I think a lot of the time, like Luke Kuechly was always a thing used to describe him. Amazing instincts. And you're like, it isn't really instincts. It's like the dude is spending his life buried in tape and understands what he's looking at before everybody else. It's not that he's got some sort of, ethereal sixth sense in this stuff. He's not like feeling it coming. He sees it. It's based off film. So Nick Bolton, I mean, it's probably the reason I make that point is because it's probably a little bit dismissive, and insulting is too strong a word, but you get my point. Like it's not giving them fair credit for the reason they're being good. So Nick Bolton, I think, will get the term instincts will be thrown around a lot with him, but he is incredibly fast to read, diagnose, and to just be there. So when you're watching, players like Kadarius Toney, like Nick Bolton is showing up and making plays against these jet sweeps and stuff, and that's a really hard thing for a linebacker, particularly one that is not like a phenomenal athlete, to be doing against a guy like Kadarius Toney. Yeah, Bolton,
he's a fringe first rounder for us. And the other guy to keep an eye on is Zaven Collins. Speaking of old school linebackers, 6'4", 260.
Yeah.
I'll see what he actually weighed in at this year, but
222.
659, 6'5", 259 with crazy long arms. He's that guy that can bench press offensive linemen and shed blocks and do the whole thing. He has incredible coverage numbers. I would say on the however part of it, he had some passes thrown right to him. He was in the right spot. He had some passes thrown to him. Incredible coverage numbers. He's not the best, not the smoothest athlete, but here's what you remember. We've talked a lot on this podcast about how tough it is to play linebacker in the NFL. It might be even more difficult in college football because when I'm watching all these positives and negative plays. It seems like every time a linebacker gets blocked, it's only because he's peeking into the backfield. He's trying to just figure out where the ball is. And I don't know what to do with this. Is it more valuable when you do get that great linebacker? Or is it just like, man, it's so tough to play linebacker, don't even try to get a good one? Because my point is, they have so much to look at. They have so much to do. As a linebacker, you have to be a great zone defender. You have to have great depth. You have to on your zone drops. You have to have great route recognition. You have to play one-on-one with tight ends and running backs in the pass game. Two completely different skill sets. In the run game, you have to take on blockers. You have to diagnose plays. And oh, by the way, when you diagnose the play the right way, football's trying to break all of your proper diagnosed plays by doing the opposite. Oh, you read the run? Great. We're going to throw a slant behind you on an RPO. Everything linebackers are supposed to be doing, offensive football is breaking. And you see linebackers all the time like, oh, who's got the ball? Is it the quarterback keeper? Oh, the running back has it. Oh, no, here's the tackle blocking me right now. It is just, I saw that a ton with Zaven Collins is why I'm bringing it up. It is just such a tough position to play in the NFL.
Yeah, particularly now. I mean, no position is getting wrecked more by this explosion of offense and passing attacks and evolution of systems like Kyle Shanahan's and Sean McVay's and Andy Reid's and all those things than linebackers. Those guys are getting targeted. They're getting put in a hideous bind every single snap, and it's why like only 3 of them are grading well in the NFL. So I think you have a real question about, well, do you shoot for the moon and try and find like the best possible linebacker in the draft because he's the only one that has a shot of achieving anything? Or do you say, all these guys all these guys are screwed, whatever you do. So let's wait on a linebacker because it's probably not fixing anything. Like Patrick Queen, I think, is probably a really good example, right? Phenomenal athlete, really good college linebacker, taken in the first round, incredibly active. He's going to be all over the field. And Patrick Queen was just destroyed in year 1. Now, he put up a bunch of numbers because he's really athletic. He gets in on a lot of plays. He's always hustling to the ball. So, there's some people are talking about him like a Pro Bowl or Rookie of the Year or whatever because of tackle numbers. But like that dude graded in the 30s or the 20s for us. He was just wrecked consistently. So do you work on the basis that, so if you had a do-over, right, would you say it's still perfectly fine first-round pick, year 2, 3, he'll eventually get there. A guy that's that active and, running to as many plays as him will eventually find the right end of that and cut out the mistakes and it'll be a good pick? Or do you say that really is indicative of why you shouldn't be spending a first-round pick on a linebacker because they can't come into the NFL the way they used to and make immediate positive impacts for your defense? They're going to get lit up.
I think we might find linebackers start progressing in a similar way as offensive linemen, where linemen do take 2 or 3 years to develop.
Which is like the exact opposite of how it used to be. Remember, you used to get like the likes of D'Amico Ryans come in and are already like a top 5 linebacker day one.
And as long as you're not judging linebackers by tackles, you can view it through this lens. Just a couple other names to highlight. Jabril Cox transferred from North Dakota State to LSU this past year, played at LSU last season. He's number 6 or 7 on our board. I've lost count here, but he's 46 overall on our draft board.
7.
Good size. And every year I'm watching linebackers and I'm like, the Colts would love this guy because every year they seem to be grabbing that long, athletic linebacker that has good zone instincts and feel and length for it. Jabril Cox is that guy. I don't think the Colts might be in the market for that player, but it just feels like a Colts type player. Maybe ends up in Philly with those connections there. And then Chaz Surratt, I got to see if Renner he did not use my player comp for him. Oh, I hate that player comp. Chaz Surratt, former quarterback at UNC. My comp for him is Bobby Boucher from The Waterboy, and Renner used Telvin Smith instead.
Why is that your comp for him?
Because he just flies around the field. He's just reckless. You blitz him, he's just going to blow up the fullback. He's a good blitzer. I don't think he has any idea what he's doing in the run game, but he stumbles in and he just runs around and tackles dudes sometimes.
Doesn't that make his comp then Daniel Bateman from the Replacements?
It could be that as well.
Daniel, go get me the ball. Get me the ball.
I thought Waterboy because it was just the same, go get the ball. I got to check the update, but there was a point in Chaz Surratt's breakdown where he had one of the worst run defense grades that we've seen, but one of the highest run stop percentages that we've seen. Yeah. So the defense grade, so it means he gets blocked a lot, he misses a lot of tackles, and he's just never in the right spot. However, he's in the right spot enough to make tackles around the line of scrimmage.
One guy that's getting a lot of late buzz and first round buzz is Jamin Davis from Kentucky.
I'm glad you're trying to say it on the spot.
Well, I actually found out how it's pronounced and still screwed it up. But the important thing to know about this guy, Jamin, I think is how it's
Okay, great.
The important thing to know is that apparently his nickname is Shadow. Ooh. So Shadow Davis is potentially a first-round pick. Great athleticism, has some great grades at times, not as consistent as you would like, but he ticks a lot of those boxes in terms of, if you're looking for an athletic, potentially elite coverage linebacker, he's your guy.
He's got some length and athleticism. NFL loves that. Another guy with about 800 snaps under his belt. That is the story of
a lot of projection.
That's the story of some of the the defensive side of the ball here. By the way, Micah Parsons has just over 1,200 snaps in his career, our top linebacker. at Penn State after opting out last season. All right, let's go to the secondary. Corners and safeties. Corners are always the touchiest when it comes to rankings, right? So let's break down. How's it going over there since you left J.C. Horn out of the first round?
It's going fine. I mean, JC's not happy about it. A lot of people were tagging him in tweets, so he now knows. He's upset. He's not happy.
If there's one thing that we can do, if there's two things that we can do here at the PFF NFL podcast, it's first, reclaim comparisons. Reclaim them, right? Comparisons, it's not equating. You can compare you and me to each other without equating us.
You can.
Right? Like we're both on the same podcast.
Yes.
But we're not the same person.
No.
Doesn't mean we're same in everything we do.
Yes. By comparison, you are significantly larger than I am.
That's right. But proportional, as we've established. So we could do that first. The second thing we can do is end Twitter snitching. Can we end Twitter snitching?
We should. Twitter snitching is just a reprehensible thing to be doing.
Explain what it is.
Twitter snitching is
Just
when
like
something gets tweeted out or put out there in the world, somebody will tag the player involved. Just tag him like, hey, it's like poke.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
By the way, JC, Sam Monson over here
Look what he said
is
about
saying
you.
negative things about you. I
And
thought you should know that.
So if you complain that, hey, that's kind of, don't be that guy, right? Nobody likes that guy. Just don't do it. If you complain about that, the defense will be like, well, you should defend your take. You shouldn't hide from it. You shouldn't be afraid that he'll see. Like, yeah, but so I'm not, right? I'm perfectly happy to defend my take. It's an honest evaluation. But there's a difference between like, hey, it's our job and responsibility here to analyze and evaluate a specific person versus, so there's a difference between like, that's my job. I'm going to put my take out there, even if it's something that's negative about you. It's nothing personal. It's just what we think. There's a difference between just putting that out there and like poking the guy in the head, right? And be like, hey, you, JC, you suck, right? Well, I don't think you're any good. Like, and hey, that's not even what I'm saying, but you see what I mean? There's a distinct difference between just putting your honest evaluation out there and like specifically going to somebody and being like, hey, you, I don't think you're that great. I think you're overrated. Huh? What do you think about that? Right? It's a different thing. And therefore, there is a difference between like putting it out there in the world, and if he sees it, he sees it. That's fine. And like going after him and being like, hey, man, look what we're saying about you. So therefore, don't be a Twitter snitch. Nobody likes that guy.
Our job is to analyze football players. And, it's fine if it gets back to them.
Yeah.
But it's the way people do it. But it's actually worse when you like tag the team. When it's like, Sam thinks the Steelers are going to miss the playoffs. And it's like, hello, at Steelers, at Big Ben, at everybody on the Steelers. This guy thinks you suck.
The point is, like, they're going to see it anyway, right? It's going to get tweeted or retweeted or criticized or quote tweeted or whatever. It's going to get back to them. You don't need to just be like, hey, look, tag him. Like, it's just, don't be that guy. Nobody likes that guy. It's simple. Remember, look, the old adage used to be that snitches get stitches. And I don't think there was an awful lot wrong with that say. Just saying. Now it appears to be like, oh, that's fine.
You going to track down the Twitter snitches? And
I'm not. I'm just saying that.
Beat him up? Send Aaron Donald after him or something?
If the man happens to befall a slightly unfortunate situation after doing that, it would be karmic justice, is all I'm saying.
Anyway, quick reminder, too, we're going to be breaking down the draft the entire weekend. NFL draft night starts Thursday. Thursday of the draft, 7 p.m. We'll be live. 6 p.m. on Friday. So an hour before the actual draft starts, we're going to be live on PFF.com. We're going to be on Saturday during rounds 4 through 7, and we're going to be on Sunday recapping the whole thing. So the entire weekend, PFF.com.
Also, we will have the like a podcast.
And we'll be podcasting as well.
We will have an almost regular schedule, be almost exactly where they normally are, but we will probably also have a bonus show sometime during the draft.
Yeah, we won't be sleeping that entire weekend, but it's so we can get the content out to our wonderful listeners. So we appreciate everybody. Again, don't forget to send in those screenshots. Hey, you subscribe to the PFF NFL Daily, the PFF NFL Podcast. Send both screenshots to NFL Podcast at PFF.com. and we'll give away a PFF Edge annual. Do you want to give one away later at the show? We're finished DBs, then we'll give one away.
You can do whatever you like.
Can you find the one?
No. That's the way. That's where I draw the line. I have been selecting the winners for previous things. This is all on you. This is your idea. You select.
All right. So you talk about the corners while I try to pick a winner completely randomly here.
Pick the guy that also, the dude with the bonus thing. I said extra points for a guy doing something else. Pick that guy.
Yeah, I got to go find him.
Okay.
So the cornerbacks, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in our first round.
Yep.
Caleb Farley might be the biggest wild card. He's at number 23 on our draft board now.
J.C. Horn, by the way, is in the first round.
J.C. Horn, per PFF,
yes,
is number 18 on our draft board and number 2
corner
among corners. In this top 5, Patrick Surtain, J.C. Horn, Greg Newsome out of Northwestern, Caleb Farley out of Virginia Tech, and Asante Samuel out of Florida State. There are 5. Then there's a drop-off to 50, which is Javon Holland, who's listed as a corner mostly because he played over the slot in Oregon, but he's more of a safety prospect. So on our board, there's a drop-off from 5 to the next tier of corners. How do you see these first-round corners, Sam?
I think it's a really good and deep class of cornerbacks. I think you can actually get a lot of really good players in this. Now, again, this comes with the caveat of like last year, all first-round corners, all corners, almost period, rookies were torched, lit on fire, set ablaze, suffered the similar fate that the linebackers in the NFL did. So I don't know how successful you can expect the group to be day one, but I think it is a very talented group. I think Patrick Surtain is like the cleanest and easiest eval in the draft of the position. Just so good, so technically developed, so sound, doesn't get beat badly. The worst thing you can say about him is he gives up inside slants a little bit too easily. And that really does feel like something you should be able to fix quite simply, if by no other reason or no other way than eventually giving up and just making him line up inside. You know what I mean? Okay,
yeah.
Whatever is going wrong here is not fixable, so just line up with inside leverage.
Just play the leverage.
Just take it away by lining up where he wants to be.
I thought Christian Fulton had elements of that last year at LSU, where I loved a lot of what he did, and then it just seemed like too much easy stuff on in-breaking routes in general.
Yeah, so I think he's just such a clean prospect and should be extremely highly drafted because of it. J.C. Horn is our number 2 corner. I don't like him as much as that. I think he did get a lot better.
At J.C.
Look, he got lit on fire by Alabama and Devontae Smith in particular, the year before. And I think he did get better after that point, and last year was much better than the season before. But I think that exposed some of his issues that I think will be bigger problems at the NFL level. He is a really good press man corner who, if he can get his hands on you, can cause you some real problems. But the number of teams for whom that is now like directly applicable at the majority of your snaps is smaller than it's ever been. It's like the Patriots, the Dolphins, who already have a ton of cornerbacks, and that's kind of it right now. So if you're New England, maybe he's a first-round pick and you're golden. If you're anybody else, I have more questions about can he play more in space with a cushion between him and the receiver who can cause him issues and make him have to work with his hip fluidity and quickness and all that kind of stuff. I think that game against Devontae Smith exposed some of those weaknesses that at the NFL level is a bigger problem.
Other corners at the top here with J.C. Horn, their press man, if that's going to be his thing, there are people that are going to have him as the number 1 corner. Mm-hmm. With Surtain, if it is like he's just pretty good, he's kind of like Rashad Bateman, right? He's just really good at everything and maybe not as exciting at everything. I don't know if that makes him number 1 for teams or if it's just, he doesn't seem special enough. Or if you don't want special at corner, you just want solid across the board like Surtain is.
But I think I think he's better than solid across the board. I think he's really good across the board. So maybe he's not special at anything. Though honestly, I think you can make an argument that like the degree of patience that he plays with is special. Yeah. It's not like an exciting special.
I'm glad we all kind of came to the same conclusion with him. I use the word patience. Eric Crocker is a guy on Twitter, former DB, who does a lot of work here. I think he's used the same word. You've used it. The patience that he has. And all that is just it's not overcommitting.
Yeah,
right?
He plays under control better than anybody I've seen at corner for a long, long time. Like when you come up to tackle a guy in space, you break down, chop your feet, and you're essentially waiting for them to make the move so that you don't overcommit and miss. He does that essentially in coverage. He plays like he's breaking down to tackle somebody as he's mirroring a receiver. And consequently, he doesn't get beat on those double moves that everybody gets beaten with because they're always chasing after that first move. He never overcommits to that first play. He's always there in position to get the second break. And just the only negative to that is occasionally it means that he's not quickly enough reacting to just like a slant, right, where it is the first move and immediacy that you need. But I think he's better than just solid across the board. He's also got the size, 6'2", 200 plus, the length. Like, he does tick almost all the boxes. For me, the only issue is that when you compare that to like a Caleb Farley, right, who also has the size and the length, but has like mind-blowingly freaky speed and burst to the ball and those kinds of things. Like, Surtain doesn't have that calling card, which to me is worth chasing at that position. But I think it's a little bit unfair to him to sort of just say solid across the board.
Just to finish up on Farley while we're talking about him, I'm going to remain steadfast in my belief that the Jets and Jags should be the teams to potentially take a shot on him. But Farley's lower back disc issue, I don't know if that kicks him completely out of the first round. Just historically, we've talked to NFL teams who have taken players who were going to go in the first round or have gone in the first round, and they were completely off of other teams' boards. But once again, there are 32 different businesses. There's 32 different NFL teams. They have 32 different athletic staffs and doctors and the whole thing. So I'm sure there will be teams that will take Farley off the board. I'm sure there are other teams who will say, the Dolphins have, 5 picks in the top 50. Hey, if Farley's there, we're willing to take him out as one of our top 5 picks or whatever it is. But for teams that don't have a ton of picks or just have one each round or whatever it is, it's a risk for a Farley with the injury concern.
Farley is a great example of, the question we posed a couple of shows ago of should we be thinking about these players as one contract humans only, right? Forget 10 years down the line. Like, Farley might be one of those players with the kind of condition that means he has an 8-year NFL career, not a 12-year NFL career, We've seen that at offensive line as well. It's like a guy that is going to have a sort of 7-8 year career, not your 10-year starter that we always talk about. So if you're going to get Caleb, maybe it's only 5 years, 6 years, whatever. But if this is the kind of injury that you think will just essentially unnaturally shorten Caleb Farley's career, it shouldn't necessarily dissuade you from drafting him in the first round. If you just treat him as like this is a one contract thing, there's no guarantee we're going to have him for the second contract anyway. Over that first contract, he could be fantastic. On the other hand, like if you think it's an injury that like this guy's going to like miss time significantly over that first contract, maybe that's a different story. But the bottom line with Farley is that I think he has some of the most special traits in this draft at corner, or in fact at any position. And it really comes down 100% to where you are on the medical. Do you clear him completely? Do you think that this will be a thing that causes him to miss time sort of consistently throughout his career? Is it something that's just going to like end his career sooner than you would like? Where he falls on that spectrum essentially should determine where you pick him.
Caleb Farley might be Doge.
Might be Doge.
Yeah.
Explain.
Now, Doge, which is up to 38 cents, by the way.
Not doggy. Yeah.
Dogecoin.
Uh-huh.
Up to 38 cents. As I'm looking at my Robinhood portfolio last night, I was like, this is like getting a franchise quarterback when Doge just goes through the moon.
Through the moon?
Yes. Because you go up a little bit, you go down a little bit every single day, like a normal portfolio, and then Doge goes to the moon, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, those are much bigger numbers.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like all of a sudden getting Russell Wilson on your team if you're Seattle or what, It's like Tom Brady to the Bucks. Sorry, just wanted to drop that it's at 38 cents right now.
Yeah, it's a lot.
If you're live on YouTube. Greg Newsom's the number 3 corner on our board here, and he snuck up there. He had a great season last year, really good season, and it's not a knock to say a guy's a good zone corner because you always make the point. More than half the league's playing quarters and cover 3, and you have to play off, and you have to play with your eyes, and you're not just getting up in a guy's face and playing man all the time. Newsom's really good at all that stuff, good footwork and everything. Another guy, I don't know if he's a great fit for everybody. I don't know if teams that play press man when you compare Newsom to J.C. Horn and Farley. He's got good footwork for all that stuff. I just don't think he's as physical as some of those other guys.
Yeah, he's a little bit. He's almost like a cross between Caleb Farley and Asante Samuel in terms of he's got more of Farley's size and length and those kinds of things, but more of Samuel's just natural movement skills. The only thing he doesn't have that both those guys have in different ways is that sort of acceleration and burst and closing speed. Like Farley has it with just blazing speed and just a freakish acceleration. Samuel has it with like immediate first step. Like he's not going to close on you if you're level at the point you both start running, but he's usually running 2 yards before you are. So he closes in that way. Newsom almost doesn't have either. It's like he doesn't have the freaky burst, nor does he have the kind of head start that Samuel has. But he in another way, he's a kind of cross between the two guys.
Yeah, I think that's a good proxy there. In Samuel, you've broken him down a ton. He's just awesome at what you're saying with the ball, with his eyes on the football. Yeah, I do think zone heavy teams will love Asante Samuel.
I'm still so torn though on how much I'm just projecting his dad onto him. Like because it's very strange how much of a clone he is of his father, right? They're basically, they play the same way. They're the same size. They have the same athletic limitations. Like Asante Samuel Sr., usually if you're going to be a small, undersized corner, you need blazing speed to offset it. Asante Samuel Sr. didn't have it. Asante Samuel Jr. doesn't have it. They run like in the mid 4.4s. They're not fast guys or freakishly athletic, but they have that insane instincts, if you like, or ability to read, or just
FBI, man.
Just
FBI, football intelligence.
Yeah, just the head start in their head over these other guys. And usually you would look at that in today's NFL and say, that is now such a small target to hit, to be good enough at your FBI, if you like, to offset the fact that you're not a great athlete, right? You need to be incredibly good at that stuff. Kind of like the Mac Jones thing, right? You need to be so insanely good at the processing part to offset the fact that you can't make plays out of structure and you have a dad bod. So if Asante Samuel Jr. was just named like, Frank Jones, right? You would be looking at that and saying, man, that's pretty unlikely that he's good enough at that stuff to offset the fact that he's small and not fast. But we literally watched his dad do that and become a Pro Bowl caliber corner, doing all that for his career. And because they're so alike as humans, I immediately intuitively want to project the same thing. Be like, well, I saw his dad do it, therefore he's probably going to do it.
I think it's okay to do it's different by just saying he's got the same name, therefore he'll do it.
Right.
Right?
But it's because they're the same player. Right. They play the same way.
Like if Eli Manning actually played exactly like Peyton Manning all the time, you could say, okay, they're brothers, but they also do everything the same way, therefore I could expect Eli to be just like Peyton, which he wasn't.
I was talking this through a little bit on Twitter with Brett Coleman yesterday, and he brought up Antoine Winfield Jr., who was similar, right? It's like they're playing different positions, cornerback versus safety, but Winfield Jr. plays like Winfield Sr. did. They were very, very similar in the way they played the game with the same kind of physical limitations. Undersized, not supposed to be able to hit like that, all those kinds of things. Maybe there is something to this. Like if you play the same way as your father who had similar physical traits, characteristics, limitations, it will translate.
It'll translate.
So I'm generally unsure about Asante Samuel. I love how he plays, and I think he does have a special trait in terms of that, like fastest freaking T-step I've ever seen in my life. There's just no wasted movement there, and it buys him a bunch of plays where he's faster than the receiver because of it. So it just scares me.
It just scares you a little bit. So Samuel's at 29. There's a drop-off, as I said, to 50, where Javon Holland has played over the slot a little bit. He's a a corner safety hybrid. Aaron Robinson, probably more of a slot corner, despite being, 6 feet plus, number 56 on the board, really short arms, but he has got fantastic footwork, plays in the slot extremely well. My guy Elijah Molden, who's another corner slot hybrid on the draft board. We have him as a safety, but I mentioned him on the PFF NFL Daily today. One of the best slot corner grades that we've given in PFF history in college. I think Molden is going to be a fantastic NFL player. And then the couple corners that I just want to mention here that are getting hype. Kelvin Joseph, that just don't have the production matching it for us. Kelvin Joseph out of Kentucky. Ifeatu Melifonwu, sorry.
Younger brother of Obi
Melifonwu's brother.
Similarly,
Another
freaky athlete.
Freaky athlete, workout, huge size, movement skills. Never graded above 78. Has good ball skills, makes plays on the ball. I don't know where the NFL stands on him as far as putting him in late round 1 or into day 2. I don't know. You usually hear more about that. I'm trying not to keep up with the buzz because I don't want to be swayed by it. But Eric Stokes out of Georgia, too, ran a 4.34 with good size. Now, he's only 72 on our draft board. I could see people loving Stokes as well. But this is why I'm saying, of all the positions, corner is where you see guys potentially going in the first round showing up in the 70s on our draft board.
Yeah, but
unless they're Isaiah Wilson.
Even if they're not going to go high, I think that those guys, amongst others, represent how deep this class is. Like, normally you have me watching a bunch of these 6'2" corners that just suck, and you're like, none of these guys are going to be good. They just don't have any ability.
But the NFL's going to like them, so know what they
so
look like.
So you have to watch them just to confirm that they're not good. Whereas this year, there's a bunch of these like 6'2" corners that you actually like their play and think, okay, that guy could actually be good. Tay Gowan from UCF is another guy who's got a lot of skills, some special movement skills, and decent grading.
Tyson Campbell from Georgia is another one.
Yeah, like you can go pretty deep down in this draft and find, I think, corners that can start.
So it's the usual deal, right? It's a boom or bust type of position.
Also, can we just pour one out or lament the fall of Sean Wade, Ohio State cornerback, who was once a first-round prospect before just getting continually beaten up for quite some time.
He was getting torched, and you're gonna have amnesia as a corner.
Now he's like a mid to low safety prospect.
He was calling out Devontae Smith in the national title game.
See, you don't want to do that.
That was not a smart move.
No.
All right, let's wrap it up with safeties, unless you want to get into kickers and punters.
I really don't.
Okay, no. Me neither. Do we have any other board? Not checking kickers and punters. You kidding me? Safeties. Trevon Moehrig is the only one that we have in the first round. Out of TCU, I love the way this dude patrols the field. It reminds me a little bit of Harrison Smith in that he can do a lot of things. I might be overrating him from a comp standpoint, but Moehrig's number 16 on our board here. He had a 91.6 grade in 2019, was in the 70s last year, but absolute playmaker at safety.
Yeah, I think he's a really fascinating player because we gave him to Chicago in our mock draft a couple of times. Our mock draft combined.
Might be in my mock draft too.
Yeah, and my mock draft. And it's like a punchline, right? It's like Chicago settling for Andy Dalton and drafting a safety in the first round. You're like, this is just the most depressing offseason in the world for them. But I think that kind of underset, like, he's an exciting player. Now, okay, it's safety, and there's a degree to which a limitation of how excited you can get about his safety, but he is a playmaking safety. That guy has led the nation for 2 years in terms of pass breakups. He will make plays on the ball. You combine him with a guy like Eddie Jackson, and that's a freakish combination of guys that can make plays on the ball and should massively improve the defense. So, whether it's Chicago or not, don't dismiss the impact this guy can have as a playmaker.
And that's the thing about Moehrig. He's probably more of a two-high safety, which isn't a knock. Like, not everybody's Earl Thomas. But as a two-high safety, you have to handle a two-way go when you're isolated on a tight end or even a slot receiver. You have to play deep half of the field and be able to see the ball and react. You need to break on underneath stuff, on crossing routes. Those are all things that Moehrig has showed on tape, or he just I mentioned that he patrols the field with so much control. So kind of like Surtain, where you talk about patience, and for a safety, you have to move quickly, efficiently from an angle standpoint, and under control. And I just think Moehrig has all of that.
And it also, the too high role gives you an awful lot more opportunity to make plays on the ball.
For sure.
It's tough to be a single high free safety and actually have a shot at doing an awful lot. It requires essentially bad passes from a quarterback or some real misreads in coverage to hang it up there long enough for you to get over and make a play. When you're playing, a split safety role as part of a quarters defense or whatever, you not only do you get the opportunity to make plays either side of you, but depending on the alignment of the offense, you can kind of sneak over from the backside of plays and jump routes and those kinds of things. If you're good enough at reading what's going on and route concepts and what the quarterback is thinking, you're the player that essentially shows up from somewhere that you're not supposed to be if you're good enough at doing that.
It's a great point. And, quarters defense essentially is you're reading like three different things. If the guy runs at me, I'm in man coverage. And this is why it's so tough to play safety. Mm-hmm. If a guy runs right at me, runs a vertical route, I'm in man coverage. If he runs a short route, I can go do something else. Or if, it's all these different options. If you see this, do that. It's like programming, a bunch of if-then statements. Mm-hmm. But you have to do it like this at safety and do it athletically. And Morig's really good at all that stuff. So it's why he's the only first-round safety for us. Elijah Molden's up to 35 on our board. Again, I love him. I would take him back end of the first. I might give him to Tampa Bay in my mock draft because I think that's added depth at a position. He could play multiple positions and just fit in that secondary. He reminds me of Tyrann Mathieu as well, and I think he'd be a good fit for Kansas City before they essentially locked themselves into drafting a tackle late first. Jamar Johnson out of Indiana has been a late riser for us. The more Renner has broken down the film, 47. Jamar Johnson reminds me a couple safeties that have come out recently. Grant Delpit from LSU, and then Malik Hooker from Ohio State. So Malik Hooker had 700 career snaps, much like Jamar Johnson, but some of just the best free safety plays. Jamar Johnson's the guy that picked off Justin Fields twice, by the way, when they played Indiana. And one of them was on a seam route, just flips his hips, makes these great plays. Jamar Johnson also has some of the worst, ugliest open field tackle attempts you will ever see. And that's the Delpit. Delpit missed a ton of tackles. Malik Hooker wasn't a great tackle, but both guys were rangy, free safety types. I'm still struggling with what to do with those guys because it feels like you just have to hide them in coverage first type of roles. But Johnson does show those valuable coverage skills. Yeah,
and he's at least got the athleticism because who was the Alabama safety a couple of years ago who was similar to
Deontay Thompson?
Yeah, ball hawk, couldn't really tackle. But Deontay Thompson was a terrible athlete once he got around to measurements and those kinds of things. Johnson at least has the athleticism, just the profile is similar.
Yeah, so
but you're right that generally that profile has not been encouraging recently.
Right, and he's still young, and again, experience-wise, it's not high, but you see the high-end plays that are very attractive. Richie Grant, a lot of people love at UCF. He flies around the field. He's interesting to me because he plays the Cam Chancellor curl flat area really, really well. It's not even Cam Chancellor; it's just that curl flat area in cover 3. So you've got to get depth. You got to work downhill, discourage pass routes, and just see things. Richie Grant plays that really well. He just doesn't really have the size of that type of player. So he's just one of those solid all-around types of players. And then Ardarius Washington is another guy that Renner absolutely loved coming into the season. He dropped off a touch this year, but he's only 5'8", 178. But another guy that just has graded really well and just gets to the right spot.
Richie Grant has one of my favorite sort of short, succinct, biggest strengths and weaknesses breakdown in the draft guide and the big board. Biggest strength, processing speed. Biggest weakness, actual speed.
That's good. Yeah, that is good. Actual speed. We did that before he ran. Let's see how close Renner was too.
I think he tested okay from memory, so maybe not quite his biggest weakness. Or if it is his biggest weakness, it's not a death knell to his career, but isn't the fastest.
I know we said this about multiple positions now, but safety rankings, another one that can be all over the place.
Yeah.
Because you've got free safeties, you've got strong safeties, you've got too high safeties, you've got teams that want interchangeable.
Yeah, there's a lot of different positions being put under one umbrella term, to be honest, at safety.
He ran 4.49. Now, the safety... the safety that had a 40 that was almost, I don't know where it's going to drop him to. Richard LeCount from Georgia. Here's a guy that just goes out there and produces. Georgia fans love him.
Trademarked.
Yeah, it is. It's actually. Did you know it's like the error text on our draft board, or if a guy doesn't have a profile, that's what we typed in there.
No.
There's a little get to the PFF.com draft board, and if a guy doesn't have a write-up for whatever reason, or if there's like an error, it says, now here's a guy. So that's our IT team getting getting clever with a little Easter egg.
Such cards.
They're funny guys. So Richard LeCount from Georgia, just a good safety, man. Productive. Georgia fans love him. Made a ton of plays in his career. He's only 5'10", 196, so he's already undersized, Sam. And then he ran a 4.83. 4.83 at 196 pounds.
Not good, Bob.
I got that, Sam. I got the right guy there. So everything he did, the shuttle was bad, 5th percentile. 3-cone was 2nd percentile, 7.44.
Yeah.
The 40-yard dash was 1st percentile at 4.83, as was his 20 and his 10. And vertical jump was 12th percentile. Poor Richard. But man, is he productive. I just don't see the NFL taking that chance. 3 straight grades of 75 plus.
Yeah, look, it could be worse.
Over 80.
You could have had Paris Ford's measurables.
Paris Ford was another guy that was on the radar until he jumped off of it by not jumping very well. He fell off of the radar. So safety is a tough one. I always like to find one tight end eraser possibility in the draft.
Yes, you do.
That's Hamza Nasirildeen. My goodness. Nasirildeen from Florida State, 6'4", 220. He's got the most tight end eraser-y type of ability. Length and, not bad if you line him up against a tight end. I still want to see a team that finds that one guy where that's all he can do is play a little man coverage against a tight end. Other interesting safety names, Andre Sisco. It's like a Jamar Johnson light. What is he good at? Making plays on the back end. What's he bad at? Maybe understanding geometry and angles. And so he's
geometry.
Yeah, geometric issues at safety, which is risky. But Sisco's a really good athlete who's made some high-end plays. Run defense has been horrible. General angles and seeing plays has been bad. But I don't know what you do with that. He's 59 on our board.
Apparently that's what you do with it.
You put him at 59
and move on.
All right, the one name I want to highlight too, the other potential Seattle Seahawk first-round pick that won't be, Divine Diablo.
Great name.
6'3", 226. He's out of Virginia Tech, just like Cam Chancellor. He was a future first-round Seahawk if they had a pick. And he can run.
He seems like another guy that could easily be pivoted to that like dime linebacker role, or even just period linebacker. Like, remember, not Virginia Tech, wasn't it West Virginia? Kazir White went from that strong safety at the same kind of size to now playing like legitimate linebacker for the Chargers.
Yeah, you could definitely see that from Divine Diablo. So that's it, our safety rankings. Let's see, how many do we have in the top 100 here? I don't have great confidence in a lot of these guys. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 in the top 100. Diablo is at 99. There's 6 in the top 59, including Sisco. So he's got 4.3 speed. He's got a ton of interceptions. Sisco, ton of picks, ton of pass breakups. I got to see, how did I write this note when I was watching him? Good athlete, questionable angles. Oh, here it is. Here's my quick scouting report. Moves gracefully around the field, just not always to the right areas.
Yeah.
That's Andre Sisco. I mean, boy, does he move well. I didn't just...
Well, that's almost like...
just not to the right spot.
Yeah, that's almost like the Ernie Sims thing of, will be the fastest linebacker in the NFL to the wrong spot.
Yeah, to the blocker.
Every play.
To get sucked into the block.
No, not even to the block, to past the block.
All right, so there you have it. It's the PFF NFL Draft Board. Just to reset everything that's happening here. Draft night, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Draft nights and mornings and the whole deal. We're going to be on PFF.com. The big one is Thursday night, round 1, 7 p.m. We're going to be there. We have special guest Darius Butler is going to be with us, former Patriots, Panthers, and Colts legend. The entire PFF team will be here. Chris Collinsworth will be here Friday night, 7 p.m. Saturday, I believe it starts at 11, and then Sunday we'll have a recap show at noon. All these times are Eastern, so get there at PFF.com. I do want to give away one Edge annual subscription. So I know you're listening, Christopher Wallen, but Christopher, you are our winner. I'm going to send you an email with your information, or the information needed for a free PFF Edge annual. Christopher wins because not only did he send us 2 screenshots of his subscription to the PFF NFL podcast and the PFF NFL Daily, but he also sent 2 5-star reviews. And that felt like extra credit to me. I'm also a softie. I can't believe we got this many emails. I really want to give a free edge to everyone. I love the email interactions that we've gotten from people. We've gotten very intuitive questions, insightful questions. We've gotten good compliments, and we've gotten them from all over the world. So we really appreciate everybody. So that's why we're trying to do this special Edge annual giveaway, which includes the draft guide and essentially 2 draft guides. So keep sending them. Screenshots of the subscribe podcast. And if you add a 5-star review, I'm not going to lie, it's not going to hurt your chances of winning. If you've already sent one, you could still be in the running and win. We will continue to pick at random.
Somebody else got bonus points for showing proof of subscription to YouTube as well. So it was
3 subscriptions.
Yeah, so he did well.
You guys should also subscribe to the YouTube channel
wasn't
just
enough.
So you get some nice notifications.
Yeah, wasn't enough to get him to win, but it was definitely
he could win the next
he was
one.
in the extra credit pile.
He could. The people that sent in can still win. But yeah, tell your friends, spread the word. PFF NFL podcast, PFF NFL daily. That'll do it, man. Another great week. We'll be back on Monday. Thanks to everybody for tuning in.